All right. Welcome, everybody. We are very excited to have our first dual provider workshop from the perspective of both a PT and a mental health therapist. So this is very exciting for us. Just to really start with introducing myself, I am Dr. Lauren Flynn. I am a licensed mental health counselor and a licensed therapist with Flowly. And I will be presenting with Dr. Scotty Butcher. Scotty, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, Dr. Scotty Butcher. I'm a physical therapist or physiotherapist, depending on where you are in the world, licensed up here in Canada. And I am very, very happy to be a part of the Flowly team and to give this presentation to you from where we can meld the mental and the physical side of things together.
Wonderful. Okay, I would really like to get us started with just a check-in to prime us for our discussion today, bring a little bit of attention to our bodies and to our minds. So the first part of this, what I'd like you to do is, I call this a temperature and tension check. So take a moment to notice your body's temperature. Are you warm? Are you cool? Are you neutral? Take a note of the temperature. And then bring awareness to any spots of tension in your body or spots of ease, spots of comfort in your body. No need to fix anything. Just observe both the tension and the temperature within your body. And you're welcome to drop a few words into the chat just to describe your body's temperature and tension levels. I'll give you a few moments. Then next, moving into bringing attention to the state of your mind, bringing attention to your mental state, which can be your thoughts and your emotions. I'd like to do a little bit of, we call this like an internal state, a weather pattern. So what weather pattern would best describe your mental state right now? Is it sunny, partly cloudy, foggy, stormy, calm? Just notice your internal forecast without judgment or self-criticism, just letting the weather be what it is right now. And feel free to share what that internal forecast is for you in the chat as well. Okay, and the last part of our check-in, I'd like to bring attention again to your body. What does your body feel like it needs right now? Maybe what small movement would help you feel maybe 1% better right now, or 1% more comfortable in this moment. You can take a moment and engage in a gentle movement. That could simply be shifting your posture, relaxing your shoulders, unclenching your hands, maybe adjusting yourself in your seat, softening your facial expression, or letting out a sigh or a long exhale. I'm going to pass off to Scotty to dive into our topic. But just as we go through our workshop this afternoon, I really encourage you to continue to bring attention to the interaction between your mind, what's going on in your body, and then gentle movements that can help you feel more comfortable and more present in our discussion today.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lauren. Welcome, everyone. And this is going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to end off the presentation with a great interactive piece. But feel free to ask any questions as we're going. We're happy to stop and answer questions. So I always like to start by asking the question, what is pain? We often think pain is tied very specifically to an injury or to a problem associated with our bodies. But what we know about pain, and the most recent pain science is suggesting to us that pain actually isn't that. There's not that much of a correlation between pain and damage or problems in our bodies. Pain is an alarm from the nervous system, which is indicating that there may be a threat. And it could be a potential threat. It doesn't have to be a real threat. It could be a threat to your body. But what we also know is that our brains and our nervous systems will generate pain as a response to emotional threat as well. So we look at it as a threat to the nervous system, and the nervous system responding by turning an alarm bell on. But just like any other alarm bell, the alarm bell goes on. We don't really know unless we look as to why that alarm bell is going on. And so these practices will help you try to understand why that alarm bell comes on and what it really means. Okay, next slide. So a couple things to be clear. So we talk nervous system and we start talking about how our brains interact with and create pain. First of all, I want you to know that all pain is real. So this means that your pain is real. Even if you've been told, oh, it's all in your head, or you hear things like pain is generated in the brains. All pain is generated in our reactive portion of our brain, which I'll talk about in a minute. But that doesn't mean you've made it up. It doesn't mean it's not real. It doesn't mean it's not your fault, or it's definitely not your fault. So we know that all pain is our brain and our nervous system's interpretation of threat, and it's very real. It creates very real pain signals that we all feel, and this is how all pain is generated. Next. So the old way of looking at things, and this is where most people still, I think, in my experience, believe that how pain is generated. Well, if there's a fire and you get too close to it, there's a threat or a pain signal that comes from the fire through what we call nociceptors, or little signals in nerve endings in our bodies where we feel this pain. That pain then travels up some sort of line of a nerve of some sort, goes up into the brain, and we register that as pain. But that's the old way of looking at it. Certainly there are signals that come from our bodies that go to our brains, but that's not the only way that we feel pain, and it's actually not how pain is generated. What we know now, next slide, Lauren. What we know now is that there's so much complexity as to how pain is experienced. So this nociception, if you look at the very bottom, that's what we were just talking about, that there is a signal that goes up into our brain. But how our brain interprets that signal, there are so many other factors that play into it, including a lot of them that are associated with our brain and our nervous system, including beliefs and experiences. Cortical plasticity means the changing, the ability to adapt our brains. Stress, pain memories, changing based on the responses, changing the pain levels. That's the descending modulation. There's even neuroimmune, so immunity effects that go into this as well. So it's an incredibly complex aspect of our human experience that we need to recognize as more than just it hurts when I touch or it hurts when I move. Okay, next slide. So when we look at our brain, we really can think of our brains in three general categories, and you've probably heard of these before. There's our reactive brain, which is involving the top of our spinal cord, the base of our brain stem, and our cerebellum, which is that sort of strawberry-looking structure there. This is our reactive brain, or sometimes called our survival brain, or our lizard brain. This is where the pain signal is first interpreted. I'm going to get into that in a little bit. Next slide. If we add on to that reactive brain, we now have what we might call the monkey brain, or the emotional brain. And this is where, when we get a signal coming into our reactive part of our brain, this is where it's processed in terms of memory, looking at, do we know what this signal is, and is there emotion associated with it, or do we have to fire up something like the fight or flight response, which happens at the level of the amygdala, which is that little gland looking thing in the bottom left there. Next slide. And then, of course, we have our cortical brain, or a thinking brain. This is the type of brain where we do our thinking. And at the very front of our brain, it's the area where we do all of our what we call executive functioning, which is reasoning and logic and mapping things all together. Now, what's important is you look at these arrows, is that signals coming from the body, they first go to the reactive brain. They don't go to our thinking brain. And if you think of this as some sort of a fight or flight type reaction, if you think of, let's say, a friend of yours comes up behind you and puts their hands on the shoulders and says, boo, really quickly, you're going to react. You're not going to sit there and think, oh, that's just my buddy. I'm not going to worry about him. I'm just going to turn around and say, oh, you tried to scare me, but it didn't work. That's not what happens. We don't think about this. We're not even aware that it happens. This signal comes into the reactive brain and we jump, we react, right? And then we think. So next slide. So as we react, what then happens is the signal goes to our monkey brain or our emotional brain. There's an emotion associated with it. So the reactive brain says, is this a danger or is it not? And if someone's scaring you from behind, it codes it as a danger. It then moves it into the monkey brain where the fight or flight response is activated. And all of the signals that you get that come into this area that are deemed to be dangerous and have fight or flight, you'll have all of the things that go along with fight or flight. Sometimes your heart rate will increase, you'll get warm, you might get some muscle tension, and all of these things. So if the person who scared you does that from behind, what you'll do is you'll tense your shoulders and you'll move your arms and you'll lift your shoulders, and that's the fight or flight response that happens. Next slide. And then only after that point are you aware. Pain works the same way as being startled from behind. It comes into our reactive brain, is processed as dangerous or as a threat, and then it goes into our emotional brain, our monkey brain, which then says, okay, do I need to move? So if I'm touching a hot stove or my foot's about to go in the fire, it's going to fire up the fight or flight response and tense up those muscles to pull your foot away. The same thing happens with your pain. When you get pain signals coming from your body, it goes up into the reactive brain, is processed as dangerous, turned into fight or flight, and those muscles will contract. Now, this is a good thing. We want this because we don't want our toes to get burnt. But the problem is as you'll see when Lauren starts talking about her part of it, sometimes chronic pain can stick around. And it can stick around in the presence of emotions or really strong feelings that tie the memories of pain in with these reactions. And they can stick around, and even when there's no threat, there can still be this type of pain. Next slide. Okay. This is where really what I'm talking about is the brains make mistakes. So our brains can make mistakes, just like pain is being a sensation, just like our vision, as an example. So if we have a look at this and this particular graphic here, I would ask you which circle between these squares is a dark circle or a black circle. Well, if you have a look at it, your brain is going to interpret them depending on where you're looking at. Any of them could be considered to be black. But if you actually move around, you can see actually none of them are black. That's the brain's interpretation making a mistake. It's taking the signals in from your body through your eyes, and it's interpreting it as a prediction of what should be there. And it will tell you that some of these circles will be black, but that is a mistake. That can happen with pain as well, and I'm going to show you a couple examples where that will work. Next slide. So there's a couple very famous stories that I'm just going to briefly mention. One is from a construction worker who was using a nail gun and had slipped at one point in time and just kind of moved around, didn't really think anything of it, got back to nailing, didn't feel anything, was doing great. But by the time he got home, he was starting to notice that, whoa, there's something wrong with my head. Looked in the mirror, and there's a nail sticking out of his head. He didn't realize it. What happened at that moment? He got pain. So if the tissue damage didn't cause the pain because of something else his brain was interpreting as being more important than the pain, then it ignored it. It ignored the fact that there was damage, and it said, okay, well, there doesn't need to be any pain. But then once he realized that there was actual damage, that's when the pain started. Next slide. Another nail story with this one. This is also a very famous story where another construction worker jumped down from, I think it was 6 feet or a very, very high level, and kind of jumped down and landed on a nail. The nail went right up through his boot. And of course, he saw this and he was in agony, screaming in pain. His coworkers took him to the hospital, or activated the EMS, went to the hospital. Everybody was trying to give him medication and soothe him, and trying to help with this pain that he's feeling, while they tried to figure out how they were going to get the boot off and get the nail out of his foot. So what ended up happening, as they looked at this and they peeled back the foot, they actually realized that the nail didn't even contact his skin. It went between his toes. It didn't have any damage, yet he was in agonizing pain. Well, why is that? It's because the brain interpreted it as threatening. It interpreted that there should be pain because of this injury, and he was scared, right? Whether he was, in this case, he would have been absolutely scared. And pain and fear go hand in hand in many, many cases, as I'm going to show you. And it doesn't have to be, oh, I'm actually scared of my pain, but there's lots of other ways that fear shows up. Next slide. Okay, so you might be thinking, well, okay, that's all great, but I don't have nails going through everywhere. What about my pain? I have this back pain, or I have shoulder pain or neck pain. So let's talk about some real examples of how this might actually work. Next slide. All right, a couple things that are really important to understand, especially when we start talking about chronic pain. Healing is inevitable. Our bodies are designed to heal. So we often hear, well, my back didn't heal very well. That's actually, from a physical perspective, not true. The muscles, the ligaments, the discs even, all of the things that can be damaged when we talk about back pain or other structures in the body, they heal. And at most, it might be 6 months or maybe slightly longer that you're going to get this healing. But if the pain persists beyond that point in time, then there's something else going on, because it's not because of lack of healing. Pain is meant to turn off prior to the end of the healing process. And on the right, you can see an example of two MRI pictures from a year apart. And where the arrow is pointing, you can see a fairly large disc herniation, that black area where it pinches on the white structure of that, which is the spinal cord and the nerves. It was a very significant herniation. But without surgery, a year later, it healed. This does happen. So the narrative that you might have heard before, that discs don't heal or you have to do something very specific, might not be 100% true, because our body does a great job of healing. In fact, we can't stop it from healing. Next slide. So what this means is we look at pain as being potentially two different types when we're talking about these type of injuries. There's nociceptive type pain, which I mentioned earlier on, but then this pain that's generated by the brain and the brain's reaction is often called neuroplastic pain. And as time moves on, the likelihood of your pain being neuroplastic goes up as you progress past the 3-month into the 6-month mark, where we know, next slide, that 90% of all chronic pain, based on the research that's out there, is considered to be neuroplastic. So our brains adapt to the signals that it's been given and says that that pain is going to continue. And it feels very, very real, because it is very, very real. The good news is, not only does your brain adapt to have pain, you can also adapt it to learn how to unlearn the pain. Next slide. So how does this happen then? We often see, again, that there's some type of fear or a threat that happens. And this might be associated, again, with an injury, or it might not. But in many cases, there would be an initial injury that happened. But if it's persisted, often what will happen with this threat, or the fear of some damage or something going on, it activates our fight or flight system that we talked about previously. What that then does is creates a neurological output, and I'll mention that in a second. That neurological output, one of the outputs is pain. And so the brain creates pain in the area where it perceives there to be a threat or damage. Now, when you have pain, we don't want pain. So we consider pain itself to be a threat. And we often have fear of the pain, or we avoid movements that cause pain. And so that just perpetuates the cycle and makes it more fight or flight, more neurological output, and more pain. But now you might be saying, okay, but when I get pain, I also have tight muscles, and I sometimes I get swelling and all of these things. How can that be generated by the brain? Next slide. This neurological output can actually generate these very real, just like pain is real, these very real physical findings like muscle tension, tenderness to touching the area, swelling, nerve irritation, restricted movement, all kinds of things that you might think, well, the pain is right there. I know where it is. I can feel it. That's absolutely true, but that doesn't mean that it's not generated by the brain, because we know all symptoms are generated by the brain. Next slide. Now, another pushback that I'll often hear is, what about my MRI results? I've been told I have disc degeneration, maybe a protrusion or a herniation or some other major finding. Well, this is a study from 2015 that looked at 3,300 individuals that had no pain, none. So they did MRIs on all of these individuals, and they found that, let's take 50 as an example. So in all the 50-year-olds, there was 80% of those 50-year-olds that were in that category of having no pain had disc degeneration, 60% with a bulge, 36% with an actual protrusion or a herniation, a fissure in 23%, facet degeneration, some of the joints in the spine, and spondylolisthesis, which is a major term for the vertebrae just sliding a little bit. These findings can be normal. These are individuals without pain. We often call all of these findings wrinkles on the inside. So as you get older, you get wrinkles. You might say that these are wrinkles on the inside. Well, your wrinkles don't hurt you. Well, these wrinkles in many cases don't as well, and they're not associated with pain. Next slide.
Scotty, I just want to say I love the wrinkles of the inside. I've heard the gray hairs of the back, but the wrinkles are first for me.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right. So what do we do about this? Well, how do we combat this? Well, we're going to talk about two different types of strategies. There's the top-down strategies and the bottom-up strategies. So Lauren's going to talk to you in a few minutes about top-down strategies, which include self-soothing awareness of some of these threats that we're talking about, again, either physical or otherwise, and sending messages of safety. And these are very, very real, very concrete ways of training the brain. Other ways of training the brain are through using the body, so through movement and exercise. Some of the PT physiotherapy exercises that you're given are not necessarily about improving movement and strength. They might be more important in terms of understanding safety in movement. Breathing practices to help the nervous system, again, are very good for training the brain. And doing mindfulness as part of your movement practices can be very helpful as well. Next slide. So what are we trying to do with all of these strategies? The target is fear. Now you might say, well, I feel pain, but I'm not afraid of it. It's fine. It's there. I know. But fear shows up in many other ways. It's not just necessarily fear of the pain. You wouldn't necessarily say, I'm afraid, but you might say, I kind of want to get rid of it. I want it to go away. I try to avoid movements that hurt or things that hurt. I'm really ultra focused on it. I'm worried that something's going to happen. So I focus on my pain. I want it to go away. Being frustrated, being forlorn, fixing it. I got to get rid of it. Trying to figure out, why is this pain happening? And forcing, I just have to push through it. All of these things are generations of fear. They're types of fear that we're trying to target, because those fear aspects perpetuate that fear and pain cycle. Next slide. So briefly, just talking about a couple bottoms-up strategies. Next slide. So one that is very innate and very important, this is in the Flowly process. So you will, if you're a member of Flowly, or if you become a member of Flowly, you will get the ability to use your breath and the way that you approach a breathing type exercise with real concrete data from your heart rate. And so this heart rate variability is just a fancy way of looking at how does your heart rate relate to your nervous system, and how does it help regulate the nervous system and bring it into a state where it's really well controlled. And this heart rate variability, through the use of the right type of breathing practices, can be absolutely fantastic for reducing the nervous system responses and helping you not to panic or not to have a lot of this fear in the presence of pain. Next slide. Now, we can do other types of training and movement as well. We all know the benefits of doing aerobic training, everything from risk of heart disease to cholesterol, balance issues, all of these things, but they can also improve your pain and your ability to heal. Next slide. Another aspect that isn't really as well recognized is resistance training, strength training. Building strength in the area can show your brain a lot of safety and messages of safety, that it's okay to do a lot of these things, even with a lot of load, once you compress something. Now, of course, we wouldn't ask you to start doing a lift of 300 pounds if you've never done that before, but you'd start light and work your way up. But these can be very, very effective exercises for helping show safety in your body. Next slide. Now, why is this important if we're saying we want to actually have some degree of pain and try and do some of these things? We can't be completely pain-free as we go through this process. So if we have a look at this, this type of slide here, you can see on the left-hand side that prior to injury, there's a certain tissue tolerance where you would get injured. Now, our brains are going to protect us before we get to that point in many cases. And that's where the line is of protect by pain. So if you're climbing this mountain, metaphorically, of course, you're climbing the mountain, you're doing something that's going to progress into some sort of muscle damage, your body and your brain is going to protect you prior to that point. Now, you might have injured yourself already, but the pain happens just very slightly prior to that tissue tolerance. And when we think of how we adapt and how we're going to get stronger and do all the things that we want to do, that all happens without pain. So that adaptation that we get when we do exercise training is without pain. Now, look on the right, where we're after the injury. We know that our tissue tolerance is going to go down because it's been injured and we do less movement. But it doesn't actually go down as far as we feel it does. We actually see pain happening at a much lower level of intensity. You can see where it says new protect by pain. That's way lower. And the difference between the tissue tolerance and the protect by pain is how much nervous system sensitivity or how much fear are we feeling around all of this. And so after the injury, that nervous system becomes incredibly sensitive, and the alarm bell of our nervous system and our reactive brain is very, very ultra sensitive and will turn up very, very quickly, even nowhere near the level of being close to our tissue tolerance. So in order for us to adapt, in order for us to make changes and get better, we actually need to push through a little bit of pain. Not a lot, but a little bit. We can't stay completely pain-free. And so part of the process that we do in encouraging movement is to encourage some movement through a little bit of pain, but not so much that it's going to actually do more damage. Next slide. So just a couple take-home strategies for you, and then I'll turn it over to Lauren. One, at the top, slow breathing. So again, through Flowly, we teach you the right type of breathing practices and learn, and you'll get a chance to learn exactly what those look like. But often it's really around slow breathing with relaxed intention. So not forcing your breathing and that, but that helps create safety in your nervous system. If we move clockwise, gentle movements in pain, we're going to keep the Goldilocks principle in mind, which is on the left-hand side, and it's basically saying that we do want a little bit of pain. We want just a tiny little bit in order to help make the muscles stronger and the joints get stronger. So that little bit of pain, having that knowing that that pain isn't going to harm you is really important. And that's the Goldilocks method. Pushing pain-free movement. So if you do have movements that are pain-free, then you can go all out on those if you want, if you're feeling good. And you can train those at any level that you feel comfortable or that your therapist or your movement professional would advise you to do. You can go into those because they're not painful. And then, of course, as I mentioned as well, a combination of both strength type exercise and aerobic type exercise is really important to build strength and deliver oxygen to your painful areas. And the combination of all of these things together can be very, very effective and supportive in your journey towards helping you with managing and understanding and ultimately getting rid of the pain. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lauren.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so really now we're going to pivot a little bit and start talking about the mind and the relationship between the body and the mind. We're going to talk about how our thoughts and emotions directly influence our nervous system, especially when it comes to emotions like fear and stress, and also emotional suppression. And this is where I get to share with you all really how top-down regulation works and how we can use that to calm our nervous system. And so the top-down you can kind of think of as maybe the mental health side of it. Those are using our mental health tools. And the bottom-up side of it is using those physical tools that he just presented to you, or Scotty just shared with you. So just kind of a preface. So we know that our brains and our nervous system scan for threats to keep us safe. Traditionally, we've thought of those threats as physical threats, but we know that the nervous system responds as strongly to internal threats like thoughts and emotions, such as self-critical thoughts, or emotions like guilt, shame, anger, loneliness. Our body responds, our nervous system responds just as strongly to those stimuli as it does to external stimuli. So just like with physical threats, our internal threats, our thoughts and emotions can cause your heart rate to go up, your muscles to tense, your breath to shallow, and your thoughts to become more rapid. Although this physical response can be useful in the face of physical dangers, when our brain keeps interpreting stress, emotions, and the everyday thoughts that we have as danger, and we remain in this chronic state of anxiety, it takes a significant toll on our physical health and on our mental health. So Scotty mentioned this, but the brain uses the same threat network for both emotional and physical danger, causing emotional threats to activate the same circuitry that produces physical pain. So fear and stress signal to the brain that something might be unsafe, even if there isn't anything physically dangerous. So for many people, modern stressors like deadlines, conflict, isolation, even uncertainty, can activate our brain's fear and survival networks. When fear becomes persistent and our stressors pile up, our brains start to overestimate the amount of danger in our lives. Our brains become more reactive and more sensitive and more easily triggered to stressors. So this really creates a feedback loop. And this feedback loop is where stress creates more stress. Fear heightens our stress sensitivity. And the body starts to stay in a protective mode, even when protection isn't needed. This is why chronic stress often shows up not just as anxiety, but also as pain, as muscle tension, insomnia, digestive issues, and fatigue. So I mentioned emotional suppression. Let's talk a little bit about what happens when we suppress these emotions. So many of us are taught to stay strong, keep it together, push our emotions aside. There's a value, an American value around stoicism. And emotional suppression actually doesn't make emotions disappear as much as we try and as much as maybe the cultural narratives convince us that it's a successful way to deal with emotions. It's not. So emotional suppression doesn't make those emotions disappear. Attempting to avoid them actually signals to the brain that the emotions themselves are dangerous. When you repeatedly tell yourself, don't feel that, or ignore that, or you try to outrun emotions, the nervous system interprets that emotion as a threat. I mean, you're running from it for a reason, right? So the harder you try to outrun an emotion, the more fear and anxiety becomes linked to that emotion. This pushes the body into a deeper, even deeper protective mode. So suppressed emotions often show up physically. Here's some examples here: tight jaw or neck, stomach issues, headaches, trouble concentrating, chronic tension, and pain flare-ups. So over time, the system can get stuck in a hyper alert state simply because it hasn't been given permission or an opportunity to express emotions that are there. So this is a tool that I really love to start with, just allowing emotions to be felt and released rather than ignoring them is a skill set. It truly is. And it gets easier with practice. Um, Allowing emotion rather than outrunning takes away some of the mystery and power of the emotion. So right here is a little framework for allowing emotion. So I'll walk you through this very briefly. This is a wonderful tool for you to be able to sit with on your own, really when you allow yourself to take a time, take the space to let the emotion exist, acknowledge that it exists, let it be there, and release it. So first, just silently, whether that's internally or externally, name the emotion that you're feeling. So it could be tension, curiosity, fatigue, or fear. It doesn't have to be a long-winded explanation. It can just be one word of, okay, this is what I'm feeling. And now that I know what I'm feeling, okay, take a step to regulate myself. Take a slow inhale and a longer exhale. And then say to yourself, this emotion is allowed. I'm safe to feel what I feel. And really, at that point, you can notice how your body responds when your mind sends that message, when it's not creating this internal tension because it's fighting and at conflict and trying to run away. It can put those resistances down and just be. So, this is an example of using your thoughts to calm your body, which is a way of engaging in top down regulation. So, that's really what I'll dive into here. Top-down regulation refers to using your mind to send messages of safety downward to your body, which works to calm both the body or the nervous system, and it helps to calm your thoughts. So here's a guide that can work for you. Potentially give it a try. It doesn't necessarily have to be in this order, but it's kind of nice to have it laid out in this way. So first, name what we feel, because labeling an emotion helps to turn off the alarm system. Again, like I said, it removes some of the mystery around that emotion. When we recognize that a sudden sense of fear is really my nervous system being overactivated and stimulated, when I'm able to understand, okay, this fear, although it feels all consuming, I can understand it. I can even manage it when I know what it is, when I can give a name to it. The next part is reframing thoughts that are fueling that threat response. So knowing those internal threats. Increasing our awareness around the threats that activate our nervous system allows us to learn to self-regulate. So for many people, the fear of failure or rejection produces unkind thoughts that activate our nervous system. And so when we are aware of our thoughts, we often have reoccurring ones or patterns of thinking that are based in our own insecurities, that once we're able to know that they're there, create awareness around them, we can start challenging them. Because just because we think it doesn't mean it's true. And it's really powerful to be able to recognize, what this reoccurring thought that I have has been a stressor for me the same way that paying taxes or getting in a fender bender might stress me. And so we have more power over those stressors when we're able to know what they are. The next one is using attention intentionally by shifting from danger cues to safety cues. So awareness is also key here. When we become aware of how much attention we give sources of anxiety and fear, then we can create some distance from that source. We can start pushing ourselves to shift our attention to things that make us feel safe. When we recognize, I have been spending 4 hours a day doom scrolling and absorbing things online that actually don't make me feel very good. I can pull myself away once I have awareness of what I'm doing and how it makes me feel. I can then create boundaries for myself and pull myself away and bring my attention to things that help soothe my nervous system rather than things that passively activate it. Number 4 here is practicing curiosity instead of fear, asking what's happening inside me rather than what's wrong with me. So we can come to recognize that pain and anxiety are our nervous system's way of communicating. It can't speak, it can't, use words. And so those are how it communicates something to us, through pain and through anxiety. And so when pain and anxiety flare up, we can begin responding with curiosity and say, okay, what is this trying to tell me? Is this, cueing to me that I've had a really stressful past week and my sleep's been really bad and I'm feeling overstimulated? Is this feeling, my body's way of really asking me to self-regulate, to slow down and take a step back? And the last one here, creating new mental association between emotions and safety. By allowing ourselves to feel emotions, we can learn that it's possible to feel anger, sadness, feel dysregulated, while at the same time also feeling safe and in control. I can both allow this feeling to exist, not need to outrun it, but also not feel all consumed by it. I can, allow myself to be the human being that will experience the full spectrum of human emotions and not fear them and not think, if I experience anger, it will run away from me or it will control me. Allowing yourself to have these emotions are a temporary state, allow them to come in and allow them to go in the way that they're intended to. So when the mind sends signals of safety, the body responds. Muscles relax, our breath deepens, it slows, and our threat state softens. We're able to move ourselves out of fight or flight into rest and digest, where our bodies really want to be, where our brains really want to be. And so here are some specific strategies for self-regulation and using top-down soothing. So the first one here is positive self-talk. So speaking to yourself in a kind, encouraging, or reassuring way. I think of this in a way of, how would you talk to someone you're really fond of, someone in your life that you care about, that you love? Or how would you want, if you were on a little league team, how would you want that coach to treat you with kindness and inspire you? That type of internal dialogue is really what we're wanting. So many of us have that internal bully that, it's just so normal to us that we're not even aware of it. Recognizing that internal bully is there is the first step, but then also creating, okay, can I create this internal cheerleader that's, if not kind to me, is at least neutral to me, is, supportive to me if possible. The next one, visualization and guided imagery. Imagining a safe, calm place or mentally rehearsing positive outcomes. Oftentimes we're not aware, but our brains are so good at rehearsing and predicting negative outcomes. It will have you imagine what would happen if you did something embarrassing. It would have you imagine worst case scenarios. And that is just something our brains are so good at and will do naturally. So what really we want to do is create a practice where we counteract that, where I can, I can imagine what the best case scenario is. I can imagine if this works out. I can imagine a way to help me feel calm and safe. Next one is perspective taking. So reminding yourself of the bigger picture or viewing a situation through another lens. Really zooming out sometimes can help us recognize that we're placing so much intensity and making the stakes so high on day-to-day things that in the grand scheme of things might not carry as much weight and emotional significance and stress as we're assigning to it. And then gratitude and positive recall, actively recalling things that went well or moments of safety, connection, and joy. Gratitude is incredibly powerful, and that's one thing that we recommend. We talk about throughout Flowly, and whether you're a member or not a member, it's something that's really important for you to incorporate into your day-to-day. Being able to be in this program and still have gratitude for where you are starting off. It is a wonderful thing to be able to devote time to yourself. It's a wonderful thing for you to be able to engage yourself in healing. So having gratitude for where you're starting and going from there. And the last one on here is self-compassion practices. So using phrases or reflections that treat yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a friend. So this really goes hand in hand with positive self-talk. Can I be kind to myself? And self-compassion is different from self-esteem. And that's an important thing that I like to point out. Self-esteem is based on things. So I feel good about myself because of my job, because of my looks, because of my how strong I am, whatever it is. But those things come and go. And so self-compassion is much more enduring. It's if all of those things were gone, I still have value in myself. If I'm to lose my job tomorrow, if all of these things are to happen, that underneath all of that, there's still a genuine love and care for myself. So we went through a lot of strategies, and really with the intention for you guys to be able to pull from these tools and build your own personal healing practice. So one, ideally, that addresses the mind, the body, and movement. One that incorporates both bottom-up and top-down strategies. And the third point here, very importantly, one that includes accountability. And accountability can look like a lot of different things, but it's really important because these practices that we talk about often disrupt maybe what our normal day-to-day routine looks like. We're bringing in something new, and doing that requires a lot of effort, diligence, and accountability. So with that, whether it's your support system, if you're a member of Flowly, engaging with the Flowly community, or your Flowly provider, or an outside provider, or your family, whatever it is, leaning on your support system as you're going through this healing journey is incredibly important. I'll pause here real quick just to see, Scotty, did you have anything that you wanted to add on before I move into the practice?
No, I think you've covered it very, very well. And it's, it really is an amazing way of looking at things when we look at our whole situation and take it from a mind and body perspective together. So I just want to echo the importance of doing that and having the right supports to be able to help you through that.
Absolutely. Okay. So we talked about the importance of bringing all of these pieces together, the mind, the body, and movement. And so now I'm going to guide you through a practice. This will take several minutes. So really, if you can, relax into it. Allow yourself to just be present in this moment and be present for what comes up for you. Okay. So I'll get started. So feel free to close your eyes or keep a soft focus as I guide you through what is a mind, body, and movement practice. During this practice, we're going to gently pay attention to sensations with curiosity rather than fear. And there's no goal to change or fix anything. Instead, we're helping your brain learn that a sensation is safe and non-dangerous and okay to experience, even if it doesn't feel that way, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if your nervous system is telling you, oh, I don't know if this is dangerous or not. We'll bring awareness to your thoughts, your emotions, and physical sensations, and explore a tiny movement that won't cause any harm or damage to your body. So begin by finding a comfortable position, whether that's sitting or standing. Feel your feet supported by the ground, and let your breath naturally settle. For a moment, just let your body know, I'm safe in this moment. Gently bring your awareness to an area where you typically notice either discomfort or tension. Choose a mild sensation, something at a level that feels safe to explore, not the worst pain in your body, just small, tolerable sensation. If you don't feel anything right now, that's okay. You can just bring attention to an area that's usually or sometimes sensitive for you. Now, see if you can observe the sensation as though you're watching something interesting and non-threatening. Notice, where exactly is the sensation located? Is it sharp, dull, tight, warm, or buzzy? Does it stay still, or does it shift slightly? Is it small, or is it wide? What else is happening around it? Let your attention be light, like you're watching a cloud float by. Nothing to fix, nothing to fight, just noticing. If your brain reacts with worry or fear, that's okay. Gently acknowledge the thought. You can say, thank you, brain. I know you're trying to protect me. But bring your attention back to observing. Now let's check in emotionally. What emotion is present as you notice this sensation? Is it curiosity or annoyance, anxiety, neutrality, boredom? Whatever shows up is welcome. Let the emotion be here without resistance. Tell yourself, I can feel this and still be safe. Offer your brain a simple and accurate message. The sensation is uncomfortable, but safe. Or, my body is not in danger. Now we're going to explore a very small, gentle movement that lightly involves the area you're noticing. The movement should be easy, slow, and not highly painful. It's a movement that will not harm or damage your body. It's just enough to activate the area. So, for example, if it's your neck, maybe try turning your head a few degrees and turning it back gently. Maybe if it's your back, try gently bending forward an inch and back, or shifting your weight from one side to the other. Maybe if it's your knee, try straightening or bending the knee a few degrees gently. Begin with the smallest possible version of the movement. Move slowly watching how the sensation shifts, softens, or changes. Stay curious, like you're studying something new. Notice what happens when you move a tiny bit. Does the sensation increase, decrease, or stay the same? Whatever it does, it's okay. We're teaching the brain that all of these signals are safe, even if they aren't comfortable. Let the movement be gentle, but you can stop anytime that you want. You are in control. And take a breath in and a longer breath out. Let your brain absorb this message. I moved, I felt the sensation, and nothing bad happened. This is how our nervous system rewires, through safe experiences repeated with awareness. As we finish, notice your body as a whole, any warmth, ease, or neutrality that's present. You've just practiced seeing a sensation through a lens of safety. Even if the sensation was just as uncomfortable, as it usually is, you're viewing it through a lens that invites curiosity and safety. So this is called graded exposure, a gentle movement paired with a calm awareness. Every time you practice this, you're teaching your brain to reduce fear and return to safety more easily. Okay. And I'd like to invite some reflection. You can maybe pop a thought into the chat, a question if you have it, or a word to describe your experience. I see a comment that says, I realized I barely moved my body today, so this was a great hour. Good. Really, awareness is a huge step with all of this, of being aware what's happening in our mind and our body, and being aware of how we relate to movement and our relationship to movement.
The other aspect of that is our bodies are designed to move, and they love movement. And we get so tight, and we try to protect. That's our nervous system protecting our bodies. But we need to allow that movement, even if it feels a little painful, just to get that feeling of, wow, I needed to move today. And that's part of the way forward.
Exactly. Well, I thank you all for first participating in this practice, but also attending this workshop with us today. Whether you are a Flowly member or not, these tools really are incredibly valuable, and I hope that you find a way to incorporate them. As Flowly providers, we love Flowly and find it to be a structured way to incorporate these pieces. But even if you choose not to use Flowly, I really encourage you to find your own sense of structure when it comes to using the tools that we talked about today. And I think that is all that I have for you guys. Any final thoughts from you, Scotty?
Just thank you, everyone, for your attention, and Lauren for providing the structure for this in this session as well. And yeah, go forward with some understanding that maybe pain doesn't have to be the enemy that we think it is. Maybe it can be the protector that it's really trying to be, and that shift in focus can sometimes make a big difference.
Yeah, I love that. And it's, pain's not the enemy, and my body's not the enemy. My body is it the extension of me. It no longer needs to be me versus my body. Again, thank you all. We're going to have this recording available at some point as well. Yep. Thank you all for attending.
Thanks, everyone.
I'm going to go ahead and end the recording.